Welcome, everyone. This is the post-secondary planning meeting for junior parents and guardians. I am Ashley Smith, and I work with students who have last names A through GO. Mrs. Toto works with students with GR through O, and Mr. Capolino is here as well and works with students P through Z. Those are some very beautiful pictures of us. They are very real life looking. We wanted to share out with you our Google Classroom code as well, just in the event that you wanted to check out what we are posting on the Google Classroom. So this Google Classroom is not necessarily junior specific. It is actually class of 2024 specific. So it's been carrying over with them from year to year, and we update it with resources and documents that apply to them, from freshman year to sophomore year to junior year, and then we'll continue to add for next year for senior year as well. So feel free to go check out that classroom code if you would like to see what is available on there for your student. At any point, you can feel free to type some questions into the chat or wait till the end, interrupt us, whatever you need. So our goal for tonight is to learn about the process of applying to 2- and 4-year schools, understanding the steps of this process that are needed to be completed by the end of junior year. And then we're going to touch base on some important dates for upcoming testing for SATs and ACTs. So the school counseling and the college application process for spring of the junior year, so this semester, students are gonna, they've already had their junior spring seminar, so we were able to meet with all of our juniors this week. We gave a very similar, if not almost identical, presentation to them as well. At the end of that meeting, the action step was for students to reach out to their school counselor to set up individual student meetings. With that said, some students are good. They're sort of proactive on top of things. They'll send an email of, can I set up an individual meeting? We will make it a point to go through our caseloads of students and reach out and schedule meetings for those students who don't necessarily reach out first. This is something that can be done between now and the end of the school year. So it's not like it's something that needs to happen immediately. But again, we make it a point, regardless of a student's plan, if it's college or not college, we meet with every single junior to start mapping out their credits. Are they on track for graduation? Are they on track to be a senior? What classes do they need that we have to make sure that they're good for next year? So it's really, a nice meeting to just dot our I's, cross our T's, make sure students are good to go. We are happy to meet with parents upon request. We know this can be a daunting process. There can be a lot of questions. So please feel free to reach out to us if you want to meet, sometimes individually, if you want to meet with your child and have that conversation together. There's been plenty of times where we've all spoken to parents on the phone or via Zoom. There's been plenty of times where parents have even come in to join the meeting with the student as well. And then again, spring of junior year is the junior parent college night. Then in the fall of senior year, right out of the gate in September, we will host the senior fall seminar. So that takes the college application process and it digs a little bit deeper into the actual step-by-step process of it. We meet with all of our seniors individually at that time after those meetings to really go through with a fine-tooth comb and go over the entire process, just to see where they're at, make sure we have a checklist. Is your college essay done? Did you already reach out to your teachers for recommendations? There's local college fairs that will communicate with students all throughout the year, especially it's heavy in the fall semester, our UHS college visits. So we do welcome college reps at the school, specifically during our lunch blocks, so that they can connect with students, answer any questions that they may have. Financial aid night with MIFA. These have been since COVID. We used to host an in-person financial aid night with MIFA, but as a result of COVID, it's gone virtual. We will touch upon this later on in the presentation, but I will say that as a result of going virtual, it's actually provided more opportunity and more accessibility for families. And then we also will host a senior parent college night that will allow us to go over again more in depth with you guys, just about where your child should be at, things to worry about, things to look for, also things to not worry about during this process. So it's a lot of information, especially if this is your first student going through this process. It can be a lot. We also tell the students too that this can be a little overwhelming at first glance, but we really do meet with them one-on-one to go through with this step-by-step at their pace. So this spring, in terms of what students can be doing now, between the spring and the summer, visit college campuses. This is a great opportunity to start getting an idea of what it is they like or don't like from a college campus so that they can really start refining the characteristics and the criteria that they're looking for to help weed out some schools. Exploring college options by doing college searches. Mrs. Toto will talk more about the different search engines that you can use to do this, but again, the more research that students do to gather information, the better. Building a college application list in Naviance. So we have instructed students, and we'll go over it with them when we meet with them one-on-one. We'll show them single-handedly how to do this. But the idea is that we want them to come to us so that they have this long list of schools that they're interested in. Some might already have an idea of like definites, yes, no, and others might need help really just narrowing it down. And we're, again, happy to help with any of those. Students should verbally ask 2 teachers to write them a letter of recommendation for the fall. We'll talk more about scheduling interviews with admission counselors at top choice colleges, taking the SATs and or ACTs. The big one is going to be maintaining good grades. We really try to stress like students finishing out strong, simply because depending on when a student does end up applying to college, oftentimes their transcript is going to be through junior year. It may not have a senior grades in yet, depending on what schools they're applying to and when. And then getting involved in school and community opportunities. Over the course of the summer, we have write your college essay or edit it. For a majority of students, if not all, this should probably fall under the edit category. A really awesome thing that our English department does is one of their assignments this semester will be to do the college essay. So they will provide the different prompts that would be available on Common App. Students get to select a prompt. They'll write their college essay. So we've instructed students to go into it with this mindset that it's not just an assignment for a class. This is really checking off a to-do list on that checklist. And then to have the added bonus of your English teacher reviewing and correcting your essay is awesome. We mentioned over the course of the summer, specifically beginning August 1st, students can begin to check out the common application. Again, that doesn't open until August 1st. We'll talk more about that. Filling out the senior information sheet and the parent brag sheet, which is available on Google Classroom. Getting involved in summer opportunities and employment. And then one that we've talked a little bit more about is cleaning up social media. We've just mentioned to students that we know it's become more common nature to have public social media platforms. So we've just, let them know that admissions do have people who are specifically hired to vet out students and look them up and see what their online presence looks like. So, some students I've already met with have said that, no, my stuff is private, or actually I've deleted Instagram, or I only have Snapchat. So it's just something to sort of think about, or to even kind of search. Your child can search themselves. You can search them just to see what's popping up. And if it's anything of a concerning nature, just to sort of, again, clean that up. So post-secondary options. So the options vary after high school. And the one thing that we stress to students is that a student's post-secondary plan is unique to them and their plan, and it may look slightly different than their friend or the person sitting next to them. For some, it's going to look like applying to four-year colleges and universities, where application dates range from anywhere between the fall of like October, November 1st, to the spring. Some schools even have rolling admissions where you can apply upwards to June or July. Other students might be looking at 2-year colleges or community college, where those application deadlines typically fall in the spring, unless there is a specialized program. More and more community colleges are actually offering specialized programs, nursing, dental, engineering, that will have specific tracks that a student can do. But these also oftentimes come with different deadlines than their general student tracks. For students that might be looking at trade or tech schools, those application dates can range from the fall or the spring. We have a number of students who might be military bound. So again, they need to be 18, and we do remind them that you do need to successfully complete high school and receive a high school diploma. And then you might end up with some students who have a gap year and they opt to work and sort of figure out their next step. It is not a one size fits all. We have students who are interested in the military, but they're applying to 2-year programs, just in case, or applying to 4-year schools and 2-year schools. I have a number of students who are planning on working, but they're applying to community colleges just in case they change their mind. So we really do work with each student one-on-one to figure out what is their plan and what works for them. So in preparation, grades in senior year classes do matter. So again, finishing out junior year strong is important, but also a student's schedule for senior year is equally as important. We love when a student finishes out strong junior year, but we don't necessarily recommend them sort of getting like a cakewalk of sorts of a schedule for their senior year. Colleges are still going to look to see the rigor, the challenge that students are taking on for their senior year. Depending on when a student applies their senior year, colleges oftentimes will request grades throughout various quarters. So we do let students know that even if you get accepted, it's important to maintain your grades, because a college at the end of the day, they could rescind their offer if they wanted to, if your grades completely dipped. This doesn't, we don't often see this happen, but we know senioritis can happen and it's a real thing. We see it younger and younger sometimes, but so it's important to note that, the application process really is a holistic approach. They're looking at the entire application, but, to always keep in mind that a student's GPA is still a strong factor. Extracurricular activities. This one becomes very talked about a lot by students, I find. And the approach, back in the day, I think it was, how many things can I participate in and put on a college application so that I look good? Nowadays, it's a little different. Colleges are looking at the quality of what a student is doing and how they're spending their time versus the quantity. They want to see what a student is passionate about, because that speaks a little bit more to them and their character. And the best way that we explain it to students is, you're not just looking at a college that you want to go to. A college is looking at you in terms of, do you fit their school community? Do you fit their school culture? Are you going to be an addition to that? So if a student works and spends 30 to 40 hours a week working because that's what they have to do, or if that's what they want to do, and that doesn't allow them to do extracurricular clubs or sports, that is okay. If a student is helping with childcare, we have plenty of students who are home helping, watch younger siblings. That doesn't really leave as much time to do, a fall sport, a winter sport, a spring sport, and then clubs. What we don't necessarily want to see is you participated in Science Olympiad for a couple weeks. You jumped over to yearbook a few times. You dropped into a few student council meetings. Sometimes students just try to check the box to check the box, whereas colleges are really looking to see, like, where do you spend your time?
So the next thing we're going to talk about, and again, this is very overwhelming to present, let alone to take in, if you are not actually seeing these databases for yourselves right now. So we had a question in the chat box, so I just want to make sure everyone hears that as well. So we're going to send this out as a PDF to you guys afterwards, along with the recording. So we mostly use 3 online kind of web-based programs, databases in the entire post-secondary planning process. We're going to touch upon these 3 just a little bit. Again, we're going to sit down with each of your students one-on-one. I always joke and I say to the students, if you don't remember everything from tonight, you don't remember everything from when we came into your class this past week, we are not going to just leave you out to dry. We're not going to say, oh, you forgot what we talked about that first week of February. That is just too bad. You missed all the deadlines. We are going to check in on them. If we notice something is missing, we are going to be following up. So the online databases, really important to remind your student to have their username and passwords written somewhere. Unfortunately, some of these we cannot reset. We do not have access to their accounts. That means they would need to reset it themselves. College Board sometimes means that they would need to call customer service themselves, which is a big pain. So please just emphasize with them to keep their passwords and usernames for these databases somewhere safe. So the first one we'll talk about is College Board. College Board, if your student is taking or has taken an AP class before, your student has a College Board account. That's how they had to officially register for the class. If your student has not taken an AP class before, there's still a good chance they have a College Board account already. Most students took the PSAT in the fall and probably have a College Board account from that. But with the college process, College Board is not the application. The only thing College Board is used for is for the SAT, signing up for the SAT and sending the SAT scores. College Board also does have an awesome tool under their Big Future feature where you can narrow down, different things that you're looking for in a college, maybe your GPA, if there's sports, activities, size of a campus, and it will kind of come up with some colleges for a student to start to look at. So the SATs and the ACTs. The SAT is the main college entrance exam that students take. The ACTs are another college entrance exam. The ACTs are a little bit different, set up different. The ACTs include science. The SATs do not have any science on them. Your student is not going to find a school that requires the ACT. Your student will find schools that require the SAT. The majority of our students only take the SAT. We do have a handful of students each year that decide to take both, but it is not necessary, but they can always take both, see how they do on each, and then we can kind of help them figure out their scores and whether to submit them or not after that. So with the SATs, the one good thing about COVID is that the SATs have kind of taken a backseat a little bit. So pre-COVID, you had to take the SAT. You had to send your score to every college you were going to or applying to. It was a big part of the application. The majority of the colleges and universities that we are seeing at this point no longer require the SAT. This is even for next year. So we're seeing colleges come out with their emails saying, for the students applying next year, they also do not need to submit an SAT. However, every single school is different. We cannot guarantee that we know what school is requiring the SAT or not. So this is a big part of your student to, once they're kind of looking at their list, and we can help them with this, log on to each college's website, look at their SAT requirements to see. Where it can get tricky sometimes, even though a college, say UMass Dartmouth might have a test optional policy, meaning you do not have to send your SAT score in. There might be specific majors at UMass Dartmouth that still do require the SAT. So we have seen this mostly with nursing majors. If you or your child are planning to apply as a nursing major, most likely they are going to need to send their SATs in at least to a handful of schools, even if the school overall says they're test optional. It gets a little confusing. We can help your student kind of figure that out too. If a school is test optional, if they don't require the SATs, it is not going to impact the student's application. So what students get worried about sometimes as well, if I don't send my SAT score, is the admissions committee going to say, oh my gosh, Billy didn't send his SAT score, that must mean he did bad on it. It's just not a factor at all. They do not do that. They do not guess about that. They do not have the time to guess about those things. So instead, they're going to put a lot more emphasis on the admissions materials that they do get from you. So more emphasis will be put on the grades, on the transcript, on the teacher recommendations, on your application itself. If a school is test optional and your student does choose to send their SAT scores, then obviously that does become a factor in their application review. What I do and what we all really do with our students and I've done this with a handful of students this year, they'll come to me and they'll say, Miss Toto, this is what I got on my SAT score. We don't see the SAT scores unless your child shares the scores with us. We wouldn't know what the scores were. So I've had students come to me and say, hey, Miss Toto, I got a 1150 on my SAT. Can you help me go through each of my colleges and help me figure out if you think I should send the SAT score in or if I should not send it in? It's not a one and done. So you could send the SAT score into 2 schools, but not the other 3 schools. It's kind of a school by school decision, and we can help with that because it does get a little bit confusing sometimes. And again, so for the SAT scores, we don't have access, unfortunately. That means that if your student wants to send their SAT score as part of their admissions application, they have to send their SAT score themselves. We are not being lazy by not doing it. We just legally cannot do it. We have no access to do it. We remind students of this all the time. We will continue to do so, but we cannot send the SAT score. What we will do, I have some students that say, oh, I really want to send my SAT score. I don't know what to do. I'll tell them, bring your credit card in or your parents' credit card in. It costs $12 to send it to each school. And I will help show you what to do so that you can log into your account and we can make sure that they get sent. So another question, do most colleges, universities require transcripts of all 4 high school years? So yeah, so the high school transcript is the final grades, so not the quarter grades, the final year end grades for 9th grade, 10th grade, and 11th grade. So if your student applies to college early on in the fall, before first quarter grades come out, which, gosh, when is that usually? October, November-ish. The only grades that college will see for their admissions process is 9th, 10th, and 11th grade. Those are all on one transcript sheet. So they will see all of those grades. However, it doesn't mean they don't take senior grades into account. We have to send the mid-year senior grades. So just about this time next year, we will send your students senior grades up to that point to all of their colleges as well. Mostly colleges want to make sure, obviously, a senior isn't completely slipping off. Sometimes colleges will ask us in the fall to send their quarter 1 grades if they're having a tough time deciding whether to admit a student or not, if they just need more information. So mostly 9th, 10th, and 11th grade. So upcoming SAT dates. We really recommend that every student who is applying to a 4-year college take the SAT. We talked about this with the students. We know it's a long test and it's not the most fun test to take, but what we don't want to happen is a student decides to apply to a certain school. That school requires the SAT and the student didn't take the SAT and now their application is incomplete. SAT dates, test dates are few and far between. You can't just take it kind of whenever you want. So the upcoming SAT dates, there's one in March. Deadline to register is February 10th, which is this Friday. There's a May test date. The deadline to register is April 7th. And then there's a June test date and the deadline to register is May 4th. Really, any of those test dates are fine. If your student is taking an AP class this year, I would just be careful. I would make sure you speak to your student because that May time is right around when AP exams are. So it would just be tough for your student if they're taking 1 or 2 AP exams and it's on a Wednesday and a Friday, and then they have to take the SAT on a Saturday. It's just a lot. So you would just want to check to make sure there's no issues. Also, some students go to other students and districts' proms. Some proms are held on these days. These are all Saturdays. I'm sure your student wouldn't want to take a 4-hour exam and then go to a prom. So just be careful on those. SATs, the other thing too, if your student is on free or reduced lunch, you can qualify for a fee waiver for the SAT. The SATs are not free. There's a fee attached to it. But if you are on free or reduced lunch, please contact the school counselor for your child and we can kind of help figure that out for you. Also, if your child is on a 504 or an IEP plan, and you feel that there might be accommodations on that education plan that your student might need on the College Board SAT exam, also contact your school counselor about that. We can submit accommodation requests to College Board. We can't guarantee them. Unfortunately, we don't make the decision whether or not your student would get that accommodation. College Board makes that decision, but we can kind of submit that paperwork for you. Upcoming ACT test dates, April, June, and July. Speaking of the SAT test dates again, we definitely recommend taking it March, May, or June. Most likely your student will get their score back before the end of the school year. So a lot of times what happens is a student will reach out to me and let me know what they got on their first go, and they will ask for my opinion on whether or not I think they should take it again. During the summertime, the only month that there is an SAT exam is in August. So a lot of times we can give them some feedback on whether or not we think they should go ahead and register for that August test date. So College Board was the first web-based program. SATs, pretty much the reason for that. Naviance. Your students are pretty familiar with Naviance. We can reset Naviance passwords, but your students have heard about all of this too. They've used Naviance for a few years now. They're a little bit familiar with it. So Naviance is also not the application. Naviance is how we get all of the stuff to the colleges. So the stuff being the transcripts, the grades, the letters of recommendation. There is no physical snail mail letter of recommendation anymore. That used to be the case. That's not the case anymore. So letters of recommendation get sent through Naviance. There is also a great search engine also through Naviance, where students can search for colleges. So a little bit more about Naviance. Again, we're going to sit down with your student one-on-one to show them this. It's really hard to just listen to this without actually seeing it. The basis of this is if your student is applying to a college, they need to make sure it is listed in Naviance under colleges I am applying to. This is really, really important because this is really the only way that we know where a student is applying to. So what happens pretty much every year at some point or another, we have a student come down and say, hey, I applied to Boston University and I'm freaking out because they're contacting me and they're saying they haven't received my letters, they haven't received my grades, they haven't received anything. We will then log on to Naviance and say, hey, did you add it onto Naviance? And most often than not, they did not add it onto Naviance. If they don't add it and they don't tell us about it, there's no way for us to know. We remind them about this all the time. We meet with them about this. So just something else for you to keep in mind as well. Supermatch is the tool I was talking about that is a good way for them to find fits, different college fits, ideal campus, with what major they want. That's a really helpful tool on there, and we'll show them that as well when we sit down with them. This is also where I mentioned before, we send the letters of recommendation. We will talk about the letters of recommendation themselves a little bit later, but this is more the technical piece of it. We'll have the students select 2 teachers and they'll select their name on Naviance from a dropdown. We will walk them through all of this. You do not have to worry about this. That teacher will get an email sent to them saying, so-and-so requests a recommendation from you. That teacher will then log into their own Naviance portal. They'll write the letter, they'll upload it, and they'll send it off to the schools. Your student does not have to send the recommendations themselves. They pretty much just have to request them, and that's really it. Also, another reason, again, why it's important to have the colleges in there that they're applying to, because we want to make sure that your recommendation letters go to the correct places. Another thing on Naviance that I really like to use with students is the tool. So we collect data from the past 5 years or so of Uxbridge High School students who have graduated. It shows what schools they have applied to, It shows what, it does not show their name, confidential, obviously. It shows their SAT test scores, their GPA, and it shows whether or not they got into that specific college. So sometimes I'll have a student that says, hey, Ms. Toto, like I'm really interested in applying to, let's see, Providence College. I have no idea how I kind of stack up. I don't really know what my percentages that I might get in there. So we'll pull up Providence College on Naviance. It will give us a graph. It'll show little dots of each student who has applied there in the past 5 years from Uxbridge. So it's Uxbridge kids. Again, the SAT scores, the GPA, and whether or not that student got in. Your student will then be able to kind of see where they fall on that graph. And if it looks like that kind of might be a reach for them, or if it looks like their SATs and their GPAs kind of fall in line with the other students who have been accepted before.
Creating a college list, your students as they enter the second half of junior year and going into senior year, they start working on a list of schools they'll apply to. We have some general guidelines that we use, but they're not hard and fast rules. The rule is a 3-4-3 rule, where they choose 3 reach schools, 4 match schools, and 3 safety schools. So when we see a list, we'll kind of go through it, and sometimes students will be overvalued for too many reach schools, or maybe there's not a safety school, so we'll kind of advise them on their list. But as we try to define reach schools, a reach school would be a school with an acceptance rate lower than 30%. So I'm talking about Ivy League schools, some Boston-based schools like Northeastern, BU, BC, Northeastern, Tufts. Those are highly competitive schools. So the GPA and test scores are going to be high. Those schools will be considered very selective. Match schools would be a lower acceptance rate, maybe 30 to 60% in that range. So if a student's GPA matches the average GPA for an accepted student, or it's close to the average, that would be considered a match. And then 3 safety schools. So if a student's GPA and test scores are better than the average GPA and test scores for an accepted student, that would be a safety school. Among those safety schools, it's really good to consider some state schools, more financially feasible schools, maybe even a community college. If students get in, they have an option to go to a school where it's financially viable for them and their family. As our students look at the fit for them, there's a couple of areas we want them to focus on, 2 of them being academic and personal fits. Obviously, the major that they're looking for needs to be at the school they're applying to. Another factor might be the student-teacher ratios. If a student really likes to work closely in smaller groups and get to know their professors, they're going to want a school with a smaller student-teacher ratio. In terms of personal fit, we're talking about things like the size of the student body, where it's located. Is it an urban school? Is it a rural school? How close is it to home? Is it an hour drive, or do you need to get on a plane? So those are all parts of kind of the student's way of looking at the fit for them. Financial, this is a family decision. This is where the parent gets involved and looking at the financials of it, because they'll be helping to pay. Just to give you a little advice, there is on every college website, it's a federal law to have what they call a net price calculator. And so you can input just some basic financial information like family income, mortgage payment, savings, and the number of children in college. And the net price calculator will give you a really good estimate of what you might expect to pay for any given college. There's also, I would recommend searching online for the merit aid for the colleges your student might apply to. You might be able to find some information on the percentage of students that get merit aid and then the average amount of merit aid a student gets. So those are things you can do to kind of determine the financial fit for you and your student.
Mr. Capolino, I'm just going to circle back. I just saw 2 questions in the chat.
Okay.
So just sorry again, someone asked about, is it best to take the later SAT date so that you have the full year of learning behind you? That's why we don't recommend. So there's a December test date. We've had a few students take that. We do not recommend that test date. March, it's fine. We don't see a huge, issue with that. But yes, I feel that May and June would be better for that. And then someone else asked, if they want to take an SAT a second time around and they can't do August, is there an option to do so in the early fall? There is. So they listed their anticipated 23, 24 test dates. August 26th is the August one. And then the next one after that is October 7th. So just something to keep in mind with that. If your child is, and we'll talk about this at the beginning of next year, if your child is planning to apply early to colleges, that October 7th test date is probably going to be too late. Most early action, early deadlines are October 15th, October 1st, October 31st, and it takes a few weeks to get the SAT scores back. So that October one might be too late.
Just one more thing about the college list. This is the rule that we kind of follow. It's not written in stone. Students can apply to more schools if they'd like. It gets a little more difficult to manage that process, the more and more schools that are on a student's list. But if a student is going to apply to a lot of reach schools, that's great. The more reach schools they apply to, the better chance they'll have of getting into one. But they don't have to apply to any reach schools if they don't want to. If they want to just sort of find schools that match their credentials and the programs they want to pursue, that's fine as well. In terms of college visits, we always recommend students visit the college before they apply. The spring is a really good time of year to go and tour school. We recommend signing up for tours on the college website. They can do them virtually or in person. When they go on the tour, we always ask them to ask questions, to learn as much as they can about the school. If they know people that attend the school, to talk to them. If they have a family member or cousin, it's always good to learn as much as they can, just so they can make an informed decision about what school they might want to attend. Students can set up interviews too while they're if they're planning on touring a school. If they set up their own interview, that sort of interview is more information based. It's not going to be an opportunity where the admission counselor is going to drill them on their background and things like that. It's more for the admission counselor to provide information about the school. But if a student applies to a school that has a required interview or optional interview, they should always take advantage of that, because required and optional interviews are part of the admission decision. So those in those situations, they should always take the interview. We have a document on our Google Classroom that we ask students to review before they go on a college visit. It's just some questions they might want to ask while they're there. We talked a little bit about letters of recommendation earlier, but our students that are applying to colleges, they need 2 letters of recommendation from academic teachers. They'll also get 1 letter of recommendation from their school counselor. There's also, we get a lot of questions about supplemental letters. That could be a coach from outside of the school, maybe a mentor, or if they work at a job, it could be their manager or something like that. And they can submit those. Those are fine. Those are supplemental. If there's something essential about what they've done, like in an outside job, or if they've worked at a lab and they've learned, they've had an experience they really think is essential for a school to know about them, then I think it would be great to have a supplemental letter. But it's not a thing where the more letters that you have, the better opportunity you have to get admitted. So more does not mean better necessarily. So a lot of schools are even moving to not accepting any recommendation letters from teachers. So that's something that if your student wants an additional letter, we can talk to them about. Before our juniors leave this year, they should ask a teacher to write them, at least two teachers to write a letter for them in the fall. The earlier they ask, the better. We have some teachers that are very popular, and they might kind of have a cutoff of the number of letters they'll write. So the sooner they ask, the better. If they do ask them, I always recommend to also follow up with an email. On the Google Classroom, there's a senior information sheet that the counselors use to provide some background. So it helps us write a letter where we can put our students in more context. The senior information sheet will ask about student employment, activities, involvement in sports, things like that. So that's helpful for us to add context and a little color to the letters we write for our students. There's also a parent brag sheet for our parents to fill out, and that's an opportunity for our parents to tell us about the growth they've seen in their child, to tell us about the great things about them. And I find that parents really enjoy taking that challenge on, just to talk about how great their child is. So who should our students ask for a letter? It's always a good letter when a student maybe has struggled in a class and they've overcome a struggle. Those always read really well. A teacher who's had a student multiple times, that sort of teacher can talk about the growth of the student over time. A teacher that a student has worked particularly well with. We do recommend choosing teachers that work at the high school, preferably sophomore or junior year. Those are better choices than a teacher from freshman year. As I said earlier, they can get supplemental letters from either coaches, mentors, or a manager from a place of employment. But before they leave, for the summer, that we do suggest that they reach out to teachers and confirm that they have 2 letters that will be written in the fall. So the Common App, you'll be hearing more about this. Mrs. Toto mentioned that this is the common application that students fill out. This is the actual application for college, where they fill in their senior year classes, their activities, they report their GPA, they submit their college essay on the Common App. For each school, there'll be supplemental questions. Students need to answer things like what do they want to major in at that college, which deadline do they want to meet? Is it going to be a early decision, early action, or regular decision deadline? And then before they apply, we always ask them to really do a thorough job of reviewing the application. If they're really happy with the essay, that they can't improve the essay anymore, then at that point, they can hit apply and officially submit the application. So the Common App can be found at They just go to the Apply Now tab and they create an account. It's very easy for them to create it. They just have to put basic information in, their name, date of birth, address, and phone number. They should use their legal name as it appears on their school documents and standardized test scores. They always apply as a first-year student. There's an option to apply as a transfer student, so they obviously don't want to choose that option. The Common App doesn't open until August 1st, so our students shouldn't log on to the site now. They should wait until August 1st or after. And we have some students that will just, the day it opens, they're tackling it and starting to fill it out. We have others that show up in September and they haven't begun yet, and that's fine too. Most deadlines aren't until the earliest deadlines aren't until October 1st and November 1st, so they have plenty of time to work on the Common App.
I just want to answer 2 questions that were put in the chat. So is there a checklist for all of the steps that students and parents need to take over the next year? Yes. We'll talk about this in a few minutes, but we are meeting with every single junior one-on-one before the end of the school year. We provide them with, we talk with them, obviously, we provide them with a handout that has the steps that they need to take before the end of this school year. I will then scan that and I will email it to the parent as well so that they can be on the same page and have the same document. And then we will also post it and we'll email it directly to you guys as a whole. We'll also post the checklist on the Google Classroom, but again, we'll email it to you guys directly. And then, sorry, Mr. Capolino, just another question while they're coming out. Someone said, I assume it would be beneficial to get a letter of recommendation from a teacher that is geared to which major you would be taking. If you're a science teacher, if you're going into a science-based line of study, yes, absolutely. Engineering, if your student, has taken an engineering class, obviously that teacher, a math teacher, we try to match that pretty closely. So.
So the college essay, this is a chance for the student to tell the college things that might not pop out on the actual application. So things that really differentiate themselves. If they have a special talent, if they've overcome, an obstacle, the things that make them unique. And our English teachers will talk to them about the essay writing process in junior English classes. They usually start the essays third, fourth quarter. The Common App prompts are on the Common App website. I usually recommend that students, after they complete the essay, to give it some time over the summer to take a second look at it once they've been able to kind of clear their head a little bit from the school year and read the essay again and make more edits. The recommendation is for an essay between 250 and 650 words. This year's prompts for fall of 2023 deadlines will come out in April or May, but the prompts don't typically change too much. So students will want to choose topics that really highlight their strengths. And COVID has been a really big topic over the last few years for essays, and the recommendation is for students not to necessarily write about COVID. On the Common App, there is a prompt where students can talk about the impact of COVID on their lives, and so there's a place there to talk about that, but it probably makes more sense to choose another topic other than COVID at this point. So financial aid, this is, a really important topic, obviously. The cost of college can be daunting. We all know that. It's in the news a lot about how much the cost of college has increased. So some things to keep in mind. And Mrs. Toda mentioned this earlier. If a student is eligible for free or reduced lunch, we can get them an SAT or ACT waiver. We can also get them waivers for the Common application as well. One path that more and more students are taking advantage of is going to community college because of the cost effectiveness of those types of programs. In Massachusetts, they have the mass transfer program. So what that is the community colleges have transfer agreements between the community college and four-year bachelor's degree programs. State and private schools are included as programs in mass transfer. So students will go to a community college for 2 years, complete an associate's degree. Through the mass transfer program, they can then transfer to a state school or some private schools, and they're automatically admitted to the program upon successfully completing the associate's degree. All the credits transfer, the student enters the four-year bachelor's degree program as a junior, and they also get a tuition break. So some programs that are very popular are with WPI, there's an engineering transfer program to go from QCC to WPI. There's computer science programs, there's business, and there's also a nursing pathway that students can transfer to four-year nursing programs from Quinsigamond Community College. The FAFSA, that's the free application for federal student aid. That opens up in October. We recommend that it be completed by January 1st. To get financial aid, completing the FAFSA is required. Some private schools also require the CSS profile. So that's done in addition to the FAFSA application. As we mentioned earlier, it's always a good idea to have some financial safety schools in a college list that might include a community colleges, state schools, because in-state tuition is often less expensive than a lot of private schools. Right now, for our current seniors, we're furiously sending out scholarship opportunities, local scholarships, and regional and national scholarships for students to look at and apply to. If you're interested in learning more about FAFSA, the MIFA organization does a lot of good work educating the public about financial aid. They have a program coming up on March 7th at 6:30 p.m. It's called Financial Aid 101. The MIFA website is also a really good resource. They have a lot of excellent videos if you want to learn more about financial aid. MIFA also runs the 529 program in Massachusetts. They offer prepaid tuition programs. They offer private loans. So it's a really good website to check out. One thing they also do is, if you're really new to this, you can set up one-on-one virtual calls with a MIFA representative if you have very specific questions for them. And they're experts at this. They're a really good resource if you have more complicated questions about your financial situation. So next steps, students can be preparing for the SAT and ACT. You can help them by directing them to maybe Khan Academy. Khan Academy is a free resource that we tell them about as well. There's other resources that are paid for, like Kaplan. SAT prep has been around for a long time. They offer virtual SAT prep. You can help your student research and visit colleges. Naviance, once your student starts to build their college list, that's something you can kind of monitor and manage with them. You can help them stay organized. We do a lot of work with them to keep them organized, but we find that it takes a village in this process to help them. we meet with them junior year for, really extensive meeting, and then again, the beginning of senior year. But I have students checking in, almost weekly to talk if they have questions they want answers to. So there's a lot more going on, and we're always available just to meet with your student. So, obviously getting the facts about college costs. I mentioned the net price calculator that all college websites have, where you can get a really good estimate of what the family costs would be for college. Attending financial aid events like the MEFA event is always good. Having a discussion about the costs of college with your child. I'm sure that's been a topic that's been discussed around the dinner table for a long time, but that'll be an ongoing discussion as, especially as students get accepted to schools and financial aid awards are sent out. Over the summer, if you can maybe recommend community service or an internship or work experience, that's always a good way to kind of round out their experience as they head into the fall of senior year. And then if you can just keep an eye on that parent brag sheet that you can fill out, that'll help us a lot as we write your student's recommendation letter. As Mrs. Smith mentioned, junior grades are really important. We ask our juniors to really keep their eye on the ball and to put their best foot forward over the next 2 quarters to boost their grades, GPA as much as they can before they begin applying for college. If you have any questions, if anyone wants to talk, you can feel free to ask a question, or you can post it in the chat as well.